Hey, what's up guys? So here's a simple painting idea for beginners at watercolor. And the kind of idea behind this painting is, let's just say you're on I just finished watching Avatar, saw all those moons in the sky and like planets, whatever they were, and was inspired to do a basic painting. So go ahead and tape your watercolor paper down to your surface. Then you can go ahead and start sketching out just some planets, moons, whatever you want to call them. With everything in the sky done, now you can go ahead and just put some basic guidelines down for the shape of your floor. A good technique in watercolor is wet and wet, and to do this you're going to start off by wetting your whole paper once. It's important when you're wetting the paper to make sure that you don't make any puddles anywhere. Just make everything one uniform, even distribution of water. If you find the paper's drying out really quickly, then go ahead and wet it one more time after the paper's absorbed the first coat of water. Now that the paper is nice and wet, mix up some cerulean blue and begin gradating from top to bottom. So I was using a brush here that was a little bit too small for the job. Make sure you use a bigger brush. You'll find that the wet and wet technique is really forgiving. If you put a little bit too much pigment down in one spot, it's not hard to just wet the brush, wipe it off, and then push that pigment around the page, pull it up if you need to. So previously we were using cerulean blue. That was the only color we've used so far. Now we're gonna move on to some Naples yellow because we've got our nice blue sky. Now we're gonna kind of transition into a sunset look. One of, I guess, the many suns of this planet. I'm just imagining this planet having a crap ton of suns for some reason. And by now the lower part of the page might have dried up already. So I added a little bit more water to make sure our wet and wet technique will work just fine. So at this point, the first gradient's complete. I let the page dry and then brushed a little bit more water onto it. And now we're using the color indigo to darken up the sky, make it a little bit more of a nighttime sky. You know, it's at sunset, the top part's gonna be a little bit darker. So we're gradiating that in. So one good way to speed up your watercolor paintings is to use a blow dryer to let it dry. I find that using the cold setting or cool setting on the blow dryers makes the paper a little bit easier to work with. And don't use the highest blow speed, air speed on the blow dryer. It'll blow the paper around, so depending on if you're going for a smooth gradient or you want that as an artistic effect, it helps if you use a slower speed. So here I'm actually using kind of the wrong color in a way. I meant to use magenta, but I accidentally used some other kind of red. So yeah, don't follow me with that. Just go ahead and mix some magenta in and then create that gradient at the lower part of the sky. Because sometimes during a sunset, the sky gets a little bit redder at the bottom near the sun. So now with all the sky done, let the sky dry first, because now we're going wet on dry. And if you are a little impatient or you don't wait long enough for the paper to dry, you won't get a nice clean edge. You can see the left side of the page, I didn't wait long enough, and you kind of have the paper, or you have the colors bleeding together. If you look towards the right side, you can see how I'm getting a nice crisp edge, and that's what you want. So the colors that I mixed together here to make the ground look a little warmer because it's nearer to the sun in this image is sepia, indigo, and a little bit of mauve. And the goal was to get the color to look warm, so you're going to want to use a little less indigo and a little bit more sepia and mauve. So it's important to keep the shape of the land simple, because the whole design of this landscape is meant to be fairly simple. And here I'm just painting in, I'm thinking of it as like this is like a base on this planet, so I'm just painting in some little structures that I would imagine you'd see. Here I think I'm painting in like a little satellite guy. It's got its legs there. And here I'm imagining a lander guy, kind of like the way you saw the lunar lander, that type of shape. I'm imagining that touching down right there. And here I'm painting in, here I've let the paper dry enough so that I could get some kind of hard edges. And I'm painting in, just with that Naples yellow color, some windows. Because I'm imagining there's people inside the buildings and they're just kind of hanging out with the lights on. And now we're going to go wet on dry again. We're going to paint in these moons and give them a nice kind of silhouette against the nighttime sky. To do that, we're going to use the color cobalt blue, mix a little bit of that up, and then paint the outline of this moon in, and then fill it in. So I wanted all my moons to have kind of a gradient color to them. So we're just using some of that indigo color from before, mixed with the cerulean blue to create that. And to get that gradient look, just mix that indigo with some water so that it can blend in a little bit better into the cobalt blue. Repeat that same wet on dry process with the cobalt blue on your other moons. So here, while the paper hasn't completely dried yet, you can use a clean wet brush and lift some of the paint off. And I was doing that to just add to the gradient color of this moon. So I'm imagining that this planet behind all the moons is picking up some light from the sun at the bottom edge. So go ahead and use some white gouache to paint that in right along the edge. And if you do make a little mistake here, the way that I did, then you can go ahead and clean your brush off. And then with a clean wet brush, go ahead and just move that pigment out of the mistake area. And to gradiate that gouache out, go ahead and just dilute it with some water and progressively lighten it up. So we're also going to do the same thing with some of the moons. Now you can add a little detail to the guys on the ground. I'm just using some of that Naples yellow color to add little highlights. You know, maybe it's a paint difference, whatever it is, just some little dots onto these guys to give them just a little bit of detail. So here comes the fun part. You can add some of that designer's gouache with a little bit of water onto a toothbrush and then flick the paint with your finger onto the page to add some stars. And the final part of this whole process is to remove the tape. It's gotta be one of the most satisfying things you can do. And make sure you take your time when you're pulling the tape off and kind of pull it off at an angle away from the page so that you don't tear your paper. And there you have it. There's a nice, simple beginner's watercolor painting that you can do. You can get it done in just like 30 minutes, maybe even 20 once you get a little bit quicker. So if you're loving the basics, then check out this simple video of a really easy technique for portraiture, mixed media, or this other one that teaches you how to draw faces from scratch.